demonic possession and or manipulation via the internet, and if it's possible for somebody to recover from such a state. In my video about Christian and the Deep server, I go into a theory that since the dawn of the internet, demons, certain demons in particular, have the ability via manipulating the electromagnetic spectrum to influence change on the internet, make fake accounts, and manipulate people, and even go as far as possessing them via the internet. And this is a theory that has been going around for quite some time within occult communities and also in various fundamentalist Christian groups too. In that video, I essentially talk about the entity Choronzon 333 from Enochian magic, and its archetype appearing everywhere over the internet over the years, in Facebook and then in Twitter is a good example, and now especially in massive Discord servers, of which the entity will create a fake account and then slowly start manipulating people on the server via incrementally bringing out more and more extreme ideas and paraphilias, in particular sexual perversions, and moving things in that direction to where it becomes more and more normalized through incrementation, to the point where the people on the server end up just being autonomous complexes of this entity that has attached itself to the server. And I used Christian and the people around him as an example of that happening. The reason I'm going back into this is that a few people have contacted me asking if people can be recovered from such a state, and that people they know have been influenced in very similar ways and have become extremely toxic because of it, and almost like they're, within a very short period of time, bang, they're not the same person anymore. And in that video, I used a term that actually comes from deprogrammers, people who used to deprogram people, usually by kidnapping them with their families to try and take them out of cults. And they used to use a term that after they'd be deprogrammed, they would be like an apple that has been cored. So they look like them on the surface, but the cult had completely dominated and changed their consciousness, that by the time they deprogrammed all of that out of the individual, there was nothing left but a cored apple, in a sense. Nothing left inside them. They are, they have not recovered. Their consciousness is essentially shattered. And with regards to me talking about the entity Choronzon 333 and how I believe that it is influencing people over the internet, I do paint a very bleak picture of that once these people become essentially cored, their consciousness is just filled with the entity. And this is where also the kind of NPC archetype comes from too. But I was talking in particular with regards to sexual perversion, things like that being built up on Discord servers with regards to Christian and the fucked up people who were around him. However, this same archetype has shown itself in the past 10 years, especially with ideological indoctrination. I'm not going to go into politics. I have no interest in it, and I am not going to take any sides, but I am going to use it as a archetypal example or an allegory of this process. Over the past 10 years, the left in particular has had an extreme subset group that has become highly indoctrinated via mostly communist and critical race theory and all that. And I'm not putting out an opinion here, I'm just putting out an observation. When somebody has been ideologically indoctrinated, to me there is little to no difference to them being demonically manipulated or possessed. Because this ideology ends up replacing their consciousness to the point where they become just another person screaming at a protest, and they just repeat the same ideology over and over and over again. Their interests go away, their core personality and the things of which they are essentially make them starts to dissipate to the point where they just become toxic and bitter beings who go on constant smear campaigns and constantly... Anyway, this is why I'm not a fan of politics and not a fan of ideology. I bring this up because people who have been influenced by a cult, which is usually by somebody who's possessed by a demonic entity, or a psychopath, which I find little distinction between the two, and people who have been ideologically indoctrinated into extreme left-wing or extreme right-wing views, neo-Nazism, fascism, communism, trying to bring that person back to the point before that, and it's the same also with religion, when to some extent, is a very difficult task. Now, I'm trying to tread very carefully here, because firstly, I don't want to influence people's personal lives, and I don't want to paint too bleak a picture. At the same time, I don't want to paint a picture that is too hopeful for the situation. With regards to demonic manipulation over the internet, or via ideology, or via a cult, or via religious extremism, to bring that person back is always going to be a two-way street. Both parties have to put the work in. And this is where things become difficult. So to simply answer the question that I've been putting off of whether somebody can come back from being manipulated via the internet, via what I would call demonic archetypes, or in particular Corazon 333, the simple answer is generally no. They can't come back because, and this is not in all cases, because the majority have had their consciousness so devastated by the subtle manipulations of this entity or this philosophy, ideology, religion, cult, and using the analogy of an apple that has been cored, it is next to impossible to fill that up again if that person has gone to that degree. And usually the only time from observation I've seen people come back from these kinds of situations is when something life-shattering happens to that individual, where they are forced into being conscious again almost. Usually something terrible that I guess Jungian psychoanalysis might call the dark night of the soul happens. That their toxicity has caused someone to destroy themselves or commit suicide or destroys a family. There's so many examples. People who are generally good people to begin with, after something like this happens, it can very quickly snap them out of that toxic manipulation of which they have been completely dominated by. And this does not take away the responsibility on the individual who became this way in the first place. Everyone must look after their psyche. If you come under manipulation, if you don't learn from that, it is just as much your own fault as the... maybe that's a bit harsh, but yeah, I mean, generally with good people, it takes something extreme to snap them out of it. I know this is quite a negative opinion on the whole thing, but this is just from my observation. And generally most other people, unless an event like that occurs and they feel terrible remorse, or yeah, usually they can't come back. Because like I've explained over and over again in the Christian videos, the reason I've been comfortable about talking about Christian again is purely because whatever entity was in him during the incest saga, it has long left him by now. And whatever remains in Christian is an apple that has been cored, just waiting to be filled up by the next entity. And I did not want to give any more of my energy towards that entity that was feeding upon it during the time of his arrest. And if I go back to cults, a lot of these people who had been cored, they would within a year join another cult. And that is because essentially the indoctrination and the possession of that person's consciousness by the cult leader, by the cult leader's personality essentially, needs to be filled. They are usually, but not always, unable to come back as, I guess, normal human beings. But this is not the case always. However, because it takes so much effort on behalf of the individual who has been religiously or ideologically, or to use the allegory Ari's used, demonically manipulated and turned into an autonomous complex. To rebuild that psyche, it is very difficult, but I don't want to say it's impossible, because it's not. I've seen people come back from this kind of stuff, be it from people coming back from extreme political ideologies, I've seen people come back from cults, and I've seen people come back from what I would call demonic possession, but not many. So unless that individual starts to show the signs that they are coming back around, and that toxicity and the ideology starts to dissipate and turn into guilt or remorse, or there is not much you can really do. And it would be dangerous of me to say to try and change them against or to hold in hope, unless that individual works on themselves. They will do nothing but essentially make your life difficult, because they will not have gone through the dark night of the soul that is generally necessary for recovery from this kind of ordeal. And it is better to, I feel sorry for people, especially who have kids who are in a divorce with a toxic partner who is actively trying to destroy their lives, but they still love them. These kind of situations are complex. Outside of that, it is best to usually break all contact with the individual. However, you can't always do that. But to be very aware, essentially everything anyone does is a form of manipulation to change the way that you think about things. I'm doing it right now, in a sense, too. And I do not want people to take this advice that I have given and live by it. This is just my personal opinions and my beliefs on the subject. With regards to demonic possession, in the ways that I've mentioned, in this day and age, exorcisms are usually out of the question. I have been involved in two exorcisms before, with regards more home exorcisms of sorts, but it's a very dangerous procedure. I'm not talking about a traditional Catholic exorcism, but I might go into those stories another time. The best thing to do is to, in my advice, is to detach yourself from the individual so you can heal and move on, because that person who you cared about, at least for the moment, is gone. However, they may come back, but it is not healthy to cling to something that no longer essentially exists. I really shouldn't be giving personal advice, but I know more and more people will probably ask me these questions, and I thought it might be valuable just to make a video on the subject. So yeah, in most cases, no, most people can't come back. And if you want any examples of that, just see people who have been ideologically indoctrinated by left-wing extremism and right-wing extremism, and see how if they've changed. And look at Twitter. It's an absolute cesspool. But yeah, I shouldn't be giving personal advice, but yeah, this is, in the end, you have to protect yourself more than any other, and unless they are showing legitimate change, but it usually takes a dark night of the soul type event, something horrendous to shock them back into reality. And yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful, and just remember, I'm not telling you this is the way it should be done. I'm just giving advice from my perspective on this subject. Have a good day.